Hi, I'm Thomas Goldkamp with 24/7 Sports and Swamp 24/7. Major news from the Florida Gators on Wednesday night. Billy Napier, the new coach at Florida, obviously working to fill out his coaching staff. It's been a rough couple days for Florida. They've had 4 decommitments in recent days. The recruiting class has slid all the way into the 70s. And Florida fans, as we talked about on the latest episode of the Swamp 24/7 podcast, a little bit panicked. Well, guess what? A lot of that panic disappeared on Wednesday night when news broke that LSU defensive backs coach Corey Raymond would be headed to Gainesville in a similar capacity. Corey Raymond is widely considered one of the best recruiters in college football and one of the best position coaches in college football. And we've talked for a long time, dating back through basically the last 3 coaching hires now. Florida fans have kind of waged this internal battle of, what do we prioritize? Do we prioritize recruiting? Or do we prioritize coaching? Guess what? When you sign a guy like Corey Raymond to your coaching staff, you don't have to worry about that because he can do both, and they shouldn't be mutually exclusive. Guess what? Florida just landed one of the absolute best assistant coaches in college football, pulling him away from LSU, a place that he has been for years and years and years, and really kind of had established himself as the guy as a recruiter in the state of Louisiana. It just a tremendous hire for Billy Napier. Let's walk through some of the accolades for Corey Raymond so you can get a better idea of what Florida is getting in this new hire. And I guess before we do that, Corey Raymond will be working with the cornerbacks at Florida. He has also been named the assistant to the head coach. Sorry, let me get this title straight. Assistant head coach of the defense, as well as the cornerbacks coach. So he'll be working with Patrick Toney, a guy that Billy Napier brought over from Louisiana, who is going to be coaching the safeties. But Florida is getting a guy that has coached 7 first-team All-Americans in his time at LSU. Let me just read you some of the names of guys that Corey Raymond has worked with and produced in the secondary for the Tigers. Okay, you're talking about Eric Reed back in 2012, Jalen Mills, 2015, Jamal Adams, the big-time safety that at one point Florida had recruited, was the godson of Joker Phillips, and Florida kind of lost that 2-way battle with LSU. Jamal Adams goes on to be a star, still balling out in the NFL now. Tre'Davious White, Greedy Williams, Grant Delpit, and Derek Stingley Jr. I mean, these are absolutely top-of-the-line college football players. When you talk about the DBU argument, there's a reason that Florida maybe has not been quite in that conversation the way it has been in the past, and part of that is LSU's secondary has been phenomenal under Corey Raymond. But not just the All-Americans. It's not just that he can coach them once they get to campus. Corey Raymond is absolutely a stud recruiter, and we've talked about Florida needing to have a couple more of those dogs on the recruiting trail. You got one. Corey Raymond, here's a couple stats for you. In the entire tenures of Jim McElwain and Dan Mullen, Florida signed 4 24/7 composite 5-star prospects. In that same time period, from 2015 to 2021, Corey Raymond alone signed 5 at LSU, where he was the primary recruiter. And he was also the secondary on a couple others that were also in that range. He was majorly important in signing receiver Kayshon Boutte for LSU. Some of the other 5-stars that he has signed over the years, Derek Stingley, Kevin Tolliver, Elias Ricks, Christian Fulton, Jacoby Stevens, Sage Ryan, and of course Jamal Adams. So Florida is getting a guy that will be able to instantly come in, have a lot of credibility, not just in the state of Louisiana, but really across the board. He's regarded as an excellent recruiter in South Florida. And for Florida fans that, rightly consider recruiting a huge part of the task for Billy Napier, I think you're starting to see that Billy Napier has a very clear plan. He wants guys that not only can coach on the field, but can certainly serve as excellent recruiters, bring that talent in. And there's a couple other things here. Corey Raymond may well bring some elite talent with him. I mentioned Eli Ricks. He's in the transfer portal right now, has not decided on a school. Corey Raymond was a huge part of the reason he went to LSU. I don't have any inside information at this time on whether or not Florida will pursue Eli Ricks, but I have to think it's an option. And certainly when you have a guy like Corey Raymond on your staff, a guy that players consistently rave about as being kind of a player's coach, a guy that multiple players over the years have credited with really getting them to the next stage of their development, you got to figure Florida has a chance right there. And so only the 3rd assistant coaching hire for Billy Napier. Still a long way to go. There's still 7 spots on the staff to fill. And I think what the Corey Raymond hire tells you, a lot of people didn't see this coming. A lot of people didn't think that Corey Raymond would have been a guy that would have left LSU. Billy Napier's got some pull. And we talked about the $7.5 million that Billy Napier will have for his on-field assistant coaches as a salary pool. That's a lot of money. And Corey Raymond's going to get a good chunk of that. But Florida still has to name its defensive coordinator. They obviously have a co-defensive coordinator in Patrick Toney. But I would fully expect that one of the remaining hires on defense will get a coordinator label as well. So you're going to have potentially some other guys of similar caliber to Corey Raymond coming in. I'll just briefly touch on a few that we know are at least receiving interest from Florida. I don't know the level of the conversations with each. Some I do more than others. I think Penn State assistant Jawan Sider is one that is on the radar for Florida. I think that one probably you see some movement sooner than later. He's a guy that has obviously had previous experience at Florida as an assistant coach and is widely regarded as an excellent recruiter. A lot of people thought Dan Mullen, one of his first big mistakes was not finding a way to keep Jawan Sider on the staff when he took over in 2018. And part of that was, Jawan Sider was asked to shift to a tight end coaching position instead of running backs. Obviously now Florida has a running backs coach already in Jabbar Jalouk. But Sider's a guy that has worked with quarterbacks extensively in his career. He's obviously not going to do that if he takes the job at Florida because Florida will have Billy Napier working with the quarterbacks, and they've got quality control assistant Ryan O'Hara helping him there. But Sider has also worked with receivers over the years. I do think there's a possibility that he would step in as a tight ends coach. I think that the preference would probably be receiver from his end. And again, nothing final on that front. I don't know an exact timeline on that, but that's a guy you need to look out for as another potential mega recruiter, very, very solid assistant coach that could potentially join the fold. Speaking of former guys that have worked at Florida, defensive line coach Chris Rumpf, who's in the NFL now, has spent time both at Florida, at Tennessee, some other stops around the SEC, has a lot of college experience, has a son that is playing college football. He's a guy that I think could get in the mix. Now, some of these defensive staff hires will depend a little bit on who they're able to get. One domino could affect the others. Another guy to keep an eye on is Tosh Lupoy. He's a guy that was at Alabama and highly, highly regarded as an excellent recruiter. A couple times, I believe, has been the 24/7 Sports Recruiter of the Year. He's a guy that I think you would see the defensive coordinator label attached to if Florida is able to pull him out of the NFL ranks. And again, I mentioned on the podcast yesterday, I think a lot of these hires probably are going to begin to trickle out. Probably, I think for Sider, if that one happens, it could come before the early signing period. But I would expect a lot of these to be maybe in the period from when the early signing period ends on December 17th until probably January 8th, 10th, somewhere in that range. Start of the semester for Florida and also coinciding kind of with the end of the NFL slate. Rob Sale, an offensive line coach, is another guy to keep an eye on for the staff. He's an excellent coach. He's in the NFL right now as well with the New York Giants, but there's some talk that the Giants staff may go through some shakeup, and he obviously has a significant history with Billy Napier at Louisiana, a guy that has had multiple stints, I believe, at Georgia. Very, very well regarded as a recruiter and as an offensive line coach. And as you guys know, Billy Napier plans to hire 2 offensive line coaches. So the bottom line is, as much as, some fans were maybe a little bit perturbed at some of the recruiting results over the last day or two, and we probably unfairly talked about that on the podcast a little bit. And in fairness, Blake and I were preaching patience to a good degree. But I think a lot of that, worry, that angst from Florida fans pretty much instantly dissipated last night when the news leaked that Corey Raymond is going to head from LSU to Florida. This is not only a massive addition for Florida, it's a big blow to LSU with new coach Brian Kelly there. Certainly a guy that they would have wanted to keep. And given Billy Napier and his staff's ties in Louisiana and the fact that Billy Napier was kind of overlooked for that LSU job, I think it's safe to say that LSU is going to have a battle on its hands recruiting in the state of Louisiana going forward. So that'll do it for this short 10-minute takeaway, guys. Corey Raymond to Florida, and that's a huge hire for Billy Napier. We will have more as the staff continues to fill out on swamp247.com. Be sure to check out the site. If you like this video, guys, we're going to try to do more of these kind of short videos as Billy Napier is beginning his Florida tenure. And then we will also obviously continue to do the Swamp 24/7 podcast twice a week, something along those lines, to give you a little bit more in-depth look at where the Florida Gators are going with a new head coach. That'll do it for today, guys. Thanks for tuning in.